happened. Now, there were big international events. I agree with that. So, May 2009, they're going to tell you that they'll tell you what will happen in the budget year and the year after. Well, that's nice. But would you bet your house on those forecasts? If you'd have bet your house on last year's forecasts, Kieran, you'd be a homeless person by now.
Can you see what they're trying to do, though? That they're not wanting to assume things are going to return to normal after 1 year, that they're putting it out beyond 2.
Well, I can see what they're trying to do. Yes, they're trying to put the best complexion they possibly can on the figures. I can see what they're trying to do. But the point I'm making to you is this, Kieran. When that budget comes down and it tells you what's going to happen in 2009-10 and tells you what's going to happen in 2010-11, just bear in mind what happened in 2008-9. Nothing as forecast. So I would take all of these forecasts, Kieran, with a grain of salt. If I were you, I wouldn't bet my house on it. Because I think you'll want somewhere to sleep.
Okay. Today's Financial Review has obtained documents under the Freedom of Information and it reports that the view was put to you in a ministerial briefing in June 2007 that the China boom would last forever. Is that true?
Well, I was almost more pessimistic than that. I built in an assumption into the budget that we would rewind to more normal terms of trade over 2 years. That's the assumption that I personally insisted on. It wasn't the Treasury's position, but I personally insisted on. So I was a bit more cautious than the Treasury. What that meant is back in 2004-05, we surprised on the upside. But we did have that assumption in there so that the forward estimates wouldn't be premised on record terms of trade. Having said all of that, the terms of trade are still incredibly strong. They're stronger now than they were for most of the period I was Treasurer.
You've been criticised, though, in some quarters for the $300 billion in new spending and tax cuts. Tax cuts, I should say. So
I've been criticised for cutting tax.
$300 billion in new spending and tax cuts between 04 and 07. Given what's happened since with this shock, should more of that been put away for a rainy day?
Well, what did I do? I paid off Labor's debt, $100 billion, and I set up a future fund of $60 billion, and I cut tax. And we put Australia in the strongest position ever inherited by an incoming government, and the strongest position of any developed or comparable developed country in the world. That's what we did. Now, I mean, you can criticise that. You can say, what? Only a $60 billion sovereign fund? When the Americans had nothing, and the British had nothing, and the French had nothing, and the Japanese had nothing. You can sit around and say, is that all you did? Set up a sovereign fund, unlike the Americans and the British. You can say that. But I'll ask you this question. Who was at the time arguing for a bigger sovereign fund? I was the person that thought up the idea of the sovereign fund. In fact, there was a lot of criticism around at the time that we were locking money up. And as I recall, the Labor Party was saying we should have been spending more on health or education or whatever.
Just on a couple of other issues, there's a Senate inquiry today on another Republic plebiscite. Do you think the government should be pursuing this more vigorously?
Look, I think Australia will move to a republic when the overwhelming bulk of the population feels it's ready. I don't think they want to be pushed. I think the referendum of 1999 showed that. They don't want to be pushed. I don't think you will corral them if that's not their view. I think we will gradually evolve to it, and I think we will evolve by taking orderly and incremental steps.
Okay. For a decade or more, in fact, in April and May, you were here in Canberra preparing the budget. So are you feeling nostalgic? Do you miss it?
It's better not to be in Canberra in April or May. I'm rather enjoying not being locked up here, to be frank. It's better to be with your electorate and your family, if you can be. No, I don't miss it in that sense. What I miss, Kieran, is this is what I miss. Having put all of that effort into getting rid of the debt, to see it re-borrowed a year after a change of government makes me think that the legacy was run down extraordinarily quickly.
You don't look like you're going anywhere, though. You're making this point about the debt and vigorously making the point. It doesn't
It's
look
an
like
important
you've finished.
economic point.
It doesn't look like you've finished your contribution on the in the public stage. Are you close to confirming that you're going to stay on?
Well, look, you know, I've done more budgets than anybody else in Australia. You know, I care about this country. You know, it grieves me to see it going into recession, the budget going into deficit, young kids being hocked with debt for the rest of their lives. That grieves me. And so what I want to say is, you know, be very, very careful. This is my message. Be very, very careful. And I think there's a bit of complacency around the joint now. Now that we've gone into deficit, people are talking about $30 billion deficits, $50 billion deficits, you know, $42 billion spend-a-thons. These are large sums of money, and the consequences will be with us for a long time. And what I'm saying to the Australian people is, you will pay for this eventually. So you have an interest in minimising the amount involved.
You look like you're going to stay on, though, in the Parliament. Is that a fair assessment? Are you close to making a decision?
No. Look, I was elected at the last election to serve my electorate and my constituents, which I am doing.
You've got to say pretty soon whether you're going to contest the
your
next
question
one.
Then is, do you want to be elected at the next election to serve between 2010 and 2013, okay?
But that's coming up, isn't it?
Well, that will come up at some point, and I'll make my decision then. But that's not this term, you know. I'm here in this term, I'm serving my electors, I'm doing what I said I would do at the last election, right? Now, you want to ask me about the next election, well, I'll deal with that when we're on the eve of the next election.
Okay, you said Malcolm Turnbull can beat Kevin Rudd. Could you beat him?
Oh, look, I said, and I'll say it again, look, this is a government, I think, which is vulnerable, and I think Malcolm has every opportunity to lead the coalition to an election victory, and I hope he does.
Could you beat him?
I've already answered that question, and I'm not going into speculation.
Okay. All right. Appreciate your time. Thanks, Mr.
Great to be with you, Kieran. Thanks.